Hello, everyone. Boris. It's the one word. I hope it didn't sound awful. But my name's Elizabeth Castle, and I want to welcome you to our discussion on decolonial love. What I wanted to do is just give you a framework for how we hope to do things in the next hour and a half. I am going to hand over to Suna in a minute, where she will introduce herself, and then all of our panelists who we hope to be in a discussion with will introduce themselves. And then I'm gonna bring it back just for a few minutes to show you some definitions that I have gathered about decolonial love that you can see up on the screen right now. That will give us some things to think about in our discussion. Hopefully, people can, there are microphones people can talk into, right? So, because this is being live streamed. We wanted to make it a conversation as much as possible, but that's hard to do. So we have to be active. If anytime in the dialogue something moves you and you might want to add to the discussion, even if you're still forming your thought, if you want to put your hand up and I'll look for you, just a nod and try to bring you into the conversation. Hopefully it'll be a little more organic, because if not, it's sort of like we're all performing a discussion for you. And what we'd like to be is in dialogue if possible. I was very pleased to show my film here yesterday, Warrior Women. It's something I've worked on in some form for 20 years, but it was the last 8 years it took to make it. And screening here was my favorite experience. It was really powerful, and conversations I've had with people afterwards have been and are make it all worth it. I come from a very mixed heritage family in Ohio in the United States. I have ancestors who are Shawnee, but I identify in between spaces of Native and non-Native, and I'm very conscious about not claiming a Native identity when it comes to the issues of financial gain. I'm very careful to walk an in-between space, because I feel that's where my responsibilities lie. But I've been a Native Studies professor or Indigenous Studies professor for the last 15 years in different places, and worked with community organizers for a long time. If we could begin with Suna Nosiemi. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself as the artist and why you chose or feel that decolonial love is an important theme for the festival?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Boris, everyone. I'm Suna Nosiemi. I'm the festival director of Skábmagovat film festival, and I'm also starting to do filmmaking, and I'm also a DJ these days. And I've been part of Skábmagovat for 5 years now, and through these years I've been able to watch so many indigenous films, and today I just wanted to gather these filmmakers to acknowledge the work you do through your storytelling, how you change our communities and how you heal our communities. And I'm hoping that we can share our experiences, because it's not easy work. You put your heart on the line when you make these films. And why I chose decolonial love as a topic to this panel discussion is I was first introduced to the term decolonial love when I was attending this non-violent direct action schooling, which was organized by Greenpeace and Suopanterror. And the leader of Suopanterror, Jenni Light, introduced decolonial love, and it was the first time I heard such term. And it was really intriguing for me. Like Jenni was telling how we should take love to our everyday language and use love in everything we do. And that was just really, really powerful to me. And I wanted to bring this conversation here, that people could learn about decolonial love, since in North America it is quite common, well-known term. And I think it's really important that we bring this knowledge to our communities. And for me, this festival is an important platform. I want Skábmagovat to be a place where people can come as they are and share their thoughts. And I hope that these films and the atmosphere of festival can make people heal. And it's also, this has been acknowledged in our artwork. Last year in our poster, we used the colors of medicine wheel, the color white, black, yellow, and red. And in this year's poster, we have these two male. And the poster got its inspiration from Brokeback Mountain. And then we also used the colors of the transgender flag, but it's also the same colors of the Saha Republic's flag, actually. But I need to take some water in just a moment. So that's why I wanted to organize this discussion, because Skábmagovat is not only a film festival, but this is one of the most important meeting points for artists to share their thoughts and share the knowledge.
Do you want to invite them to introduce themselves?
Yeah. And also, as I'm beginning to make films, it's I'm kind of slowly drifting to the filmmaking world. But before that, I've in this community, I have been sharing my experiences and thoughts about mental health issues on social media. And it's been really good to me. I've had a lot of people engaging to my posts about the ethno-stress and burnout and other issues. And but now when I started doing it, it was really good for me. But at some point, I realized that sharing my experiences, I really need to filter it through. And sometimes I just post everything out there, and then I become a target. So now, as I've started making films, I've realized that I can use film as a tool to heal myself and hopefully other people. So this is also why I want to talk with you who are already prominent filmmakers. How do you use film as a tool to heal? And if we could start from Sara Margrethe Oskal, if you could introduce who you are and tell what you do, and then just move on to the other panelists.
Baby, my name is Sara Margrethe Oskal, and I am from Kautokeino in Finnmark. Do you hear me? Or should I? Is it better like now? Yeah, okay. My starting point is theater, and from that I have studied writing poems, and I've been doing research at the Theatre Academy in Oslo, and slowly getting into films and filmmaking. And when I did my research at the Theatre Academy in Oslo, I was making or searching for humor and making Sami gesture characters talking about taboos, like how we don't talk about domestic violence, how we are not talking about sexual harassment and heavy issues, but using humor. So I have always been interested in telling about people and relationships and how we experience different things in life and how we can move on further with our lives. And when I started making films, I kind of followed up the idea, not using humor in the same sense that I use on stage, but my first film was about a family that is having troubles, like the mother is not taking care of the kids and the kids has to deal themselves, and the mother is like really stressed and frustrated, and the kids are like fighting and arguing. So and in this film, my second short, Baby Neda, the issue is like harassment or racism towards Sami today. So again, a hard issue to tell on in a film or in a short film, but my aim is to like go into these topics and make films that touch people. So hopefully I can change attitudes and make people aware of those issues. So that's shortly how I use films. I try to dig the hard topics and bring them out, reveal stuff that is kind of hidden in some way. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ellesofe Sara, and I am director of Gihtu Gihtu, which is shown tomorrow. I come from dance. That's how I stumbled into this world. My approach in the film, and also actually in all my artistic work, is kind of digging into people in our surroundings, and especially elderly people, to have this documentary approach of about telling about their inside, or what are their thoughts, things that are not written down, things that you might write in a diary if you would write diary. But yeah, how you think about things and how you think receive the world somehow. So that is kind of what I think now have been apparent in my artistic work. And I'm very glad for this request to be in this panel, and I'm very glad to get introduced to this new term. I think it's a new way of looking at, for example, Sami film or Sami art. I don't think I haven't looked at it that way.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sardana Savina. I'm from the Sakha Republic, which is in Yakutia, in Russia. So the second name of the republic is Yakutia. Well, I'm here at the Skábmagovat Film Festival. I think it's my second visit just for the festival. I have been in Iri before twice. Well, and at the beginning, I want to say that I really appreciate and want to thank Skábmagovat Film Festival for work you are doing, because Skábmagovat, for me personally, it was a starting point to work in filmmaking, honestly, because here I met filmmakers from different part of the world, those who are doing indigenous filmmaking, and this is how I started to promote films from my area. And this time this time we are here with small team from the Sakha Republic, and we brought 11 titles, 4 features and 6 short films, because with a director and artistic director, we decided to make this spotlight of Sakha films, and it's called also sort of historical moment for our filmmaking, because this is the first time when in Sami we are presenting such a huge program. We are really happy. Thank you so much. Well, as for myself, honestly, I'm not a professional filmmaker, because I graduated from Sakha State University as a teacher. And then while working at the Arctic State Institute of Arts and Culture, I've been involved in some international projects and this student exchange and everything devoted to art, so indigenous art and culture issues. And then, so I had chance to make subtitles of some Yakutian films, and we were never thinking about being shown and widely all over the world and so on. But then after Skábmagovat and after some thoughts, I just realized that we have to show our films why nobody knows that we are also making films. And this is how I started to work. And now I'm also producing films. I have already produced several, so 2 features and 1 short with the director Dmitry Davidov. Maybe some of you met him 2 years ago. He presented here our film Bonfire. But also I'm a person who's kind of, I don't like that word, a leader, but yeah, I'm just trying to gather all filmmakers around me to help them to promote their work. So we are planning to do some things. And now we see that all those activities are very resultative, and yeah. And I see that there is a big growth of interest, not only in our community towards our filmmaking, but also inside of our very big country as Russia, but also in the world. And I think it's a good thing, because, yeah, through films we just show ourselves, we just learn ourselves, first of all. We learn our culture, our traditions, our language, and then, of course, we represent ourselves to the other part of the world. Yeah. So I think that's it. Yeah. Well, then if there's some thoughts, I will just add later, okay? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mark Fusing Rosbach, and I'm a filmmaker from Greenland. And I made the movie Among Us in the Land of Our Shadows, which will be screened tomorrow. Yeah, I've always been working with movies, and I've never had a different job. Yeah, I started since I was little with photography and making visual effects, and making Star Wars pictures and short films. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. What? It's very good. No. Yeah. Should I talk about the healing stuff, or is this just introduction? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've been writing movies about our culture mostly. So this Among Us is my first movie, and then I'm working on the sequel right now. I just finished the manuscript. So yeah. Yes.
Buddhas. My name is Mailis Eira, and I'm the filmmaker of Samis Have Rights, which will be screened tomorrow. I'm from Kautokeino. I have my producer with me here today, Kanada, as well. I have also always, since I was a child, I was always filming. My mom had a camera, and she allowed us children to film with the camera. And when I got older, I started working at the Sami children's TV, NRK Sápmi. And then I went to the film school in Lofoten, Kabelvåg. So yeah, that's a short bio with my, when I start to work with projects, new projects, my starting point is always my feelings. And I try to locate where does this feeling comes from. So, and for me it's also very important to, like, if you want to understand the present time, you have to look back to your history. And my impression is also like our Sami history is really hidden. Like it's really hard to get the overlook, like the view of your whole history. So, and also because we are brought up with the Eurocentric history, like we are used to hearing about the majority history, but never, the majorities have never heard about our history. So for me, it's always a good point, try to go back to history, but also at the same time understand, recognize or locate the feelings that you have today. Why do you think like that? Why do you act like that? And yeah. Yes.
So the slide that's been up, I wanted to just locate Junot Diaz as the author or the thinker who first introduced this idea. And he says a lot about it, and I encourage you to, read his books. They're very engaging. But the only kind of love that could liberate from the horrible legacy of colonial violence is a recognition of why you need to have decolonial framing love. I mean, you can drop it out; it can become assumed, but it's a critical part of the process of healing. And some definitions, and I'll just show you. I'll show you this first because this will be easier. Is I took everything from these 3 articles, and I'll make that available because they're very accessible, and some of you may have come across them already. A lot of you will probably know the artists that are in them. This second one, Decolonial Love, these indigenous artists are taking back the love colonialism stole. And that was just, in 2017. And that's basically the framework. So critically about it is learning to love each other and ourselves. So it's a practice of self-love and the love of your neighbor without the burden of racism, sexism, transphobia, or homophobia. Trans and homophobia are important and critical parts of it being a full expression of decolonial love. Letting go of shame, the shame and violence that comes with being indigenous, and that the way in which indigenous peoples are taught that our bodies, sexualities, and genders are wrong and not as valuable as other people's. And of course, coming back to traditions and cultures, and particularly through artistic practices, to love ourselves and each other as we were always meant to. Now, in an academic sense, these can be dressed up and made really inaccessible. But when you just break it down, it's very helpful because, for example, the practice of decolonial love for many people, and that's what people want to really encourage, is understanding how important it is as a response, as a healing response to whether you call it intergenerational, historical, colonial violence or trauma. And I put this quote in here just because I thought there are so many, but I thought this one was really powerful, by Billy Ray Belcourt, a queer writer from Driftpile Cree Nation. Colonialism has made a cage out of our bodies, cages for which we don't have keys. Decolonial love works a way out of this state of captivity. And I just, the framing of both the challenge of when you are in a cage and, how do you get out? And there's a number of ways of getting out. And here, part of what we want to do is, take back the keys and let ourselves out, rather than, I think a lot of times the process feels like you are trying to break out. And it can cause violence to yourself in the process. And then finally, using art to address the intergenerational impact of colonial violence, and then to practice that decolonial love. So overall, those were the sort of critical points that frame it. As we talk, a lot of people address this idea of decolonization. Sorry. And in this case, and I'll just say this part and personalize it a little bit. I work as like a scholar and an activist, and the film was something that I really wanted to do, to express, to find a way to tell this story that I'd been a part of, and I'd been a part of these families, and I had been taking and doing oral histories for 20 years with women who wanted to collaborate in a way to tell their story to a bigger audience. And also but their audience, and our audience was always, and this is what we asked ourselves every time we came back around, was the audience were grandchildren, were each woman, and collectively their own grandchildren. And it wasn't until even I started to look at, and I realized like my brain sort of immediately did that. Maybe it's an academic thing, but I just started thinking about things like, okay, where's the answer? What are the definitions? Then I was like, my whole film is about this process of decolonial love, like everything in it. But I don't think about, even for myself, the emotional part or the process of it. I was always thinking how I have to do what the obligations were that were bigger than myself, or that were to other people, that were for, for these women, the obligations to get it done and the responsibilities. But when we looked closer, and that's one of the things that's happened very recently. I don't know if some of you have had a chance to see it, but part of the bigger history of Red Power movement activism or indigenous activism was the mother and daughter relationship. And what it took years to commit to and being able to tell that story, because we were so afraid of all the ways. Every time we decided, oh, well, what if we talk about her drinking? Or what if we talk about basically the fact that, she left her kids all this time to go be an activist. There was just so much fear about how things would be perceived, how it would be taken out of context, we'd be airing dirty laundry or inappropriate things, the taboo of filming certain things. So it was very overwhelming to look at how powerful it is to see that we practice these things, but we often don't, in our art and in the work that we do. But I don't think we spend enough time fundamentally, loving ourselves and loving each other in really basic, critical ways. And so I think it really, when, I was like, oh, as a professor, I can certainly frame things, then I'm like, ooh, but can I expose my actual self or feelings in a group context? And I think that's something that we just don't do very often. So that's a picture. Is there anybody who wants to add something to just the framing of it, if you could? And just we'll just want to keep things moving. Just quickly say your name, and then we're going to move into the questions for the panelists, and then everyone else.
My name is Mika Laiti. Just a short about the colonialization in Finland. For most the average streetwalker, if you tell them that Sami has been colonized, they would not agree. So when we are talking about decolonize love, many times you first have they start wondering why and what, because for them colonization is something that happens in the third world and not here in the Arctic, because things are well for you and so on. You have schools and all stuff and that. So it may be, I don't know if it's the same in Saha or Norway or Greenland.
If you want to comment.
You know that in Russia, usually the term colonized and decolonization is not used at all. For example, my republic had the status of the kind of sovereign state officially at the beginning of 20th century when autonomous Soviet Yakutian Republic occurred. But historically, Russians came to our land 400 years ago. And when I was a school child, in history books and everywhere, they were not ever used this term, colonization. Yeah, and this example of it was somewhere in another part of the world, in the third world. We heard about those stories about colonization in the US and Australia probably. But this term was never kind of accepted towards ourselves. Yeah, and but nowadays some scientists and sociologists, they of course, we are just a province which is extremely rich in natural resources, and I think these kind of industrial issues occur in a lot of indigenous societies, and we are facing troubles with these industrial big companies which are accepting lots of digging, extracting lots of resources from our land, and all that money goes through us and never staying in our place. And this is kind of one of the not problems, but all the time local people are raising such issue. Why we are if we are extremely rich in that resources, why we are not living like in Saudi Arabia, for example. And all those gas and oil issues, even for locals, it's still very expensive, for example, to get that gas and so on. But the thing is that our history is quite complicated because, if you know, we had this so-called Soviet time period when all nations living inside of Russia, we all were Soviet people. A kind of nivellation of cultures and languages were occurring. At school, I was, for example, studying not my native language, but Russian language. But I had chance to learn my language because the community was 100% Sakha. That's why out of school we were speaking our native language, and it was not forbidden in a way that, it was not forbidden. But nowadays I face that we can use, towards us, we can use even sort of post-colonial society, probably. Or not post-colonial, but even neo-colonial term. I heard that term from sociologists who are working in our republic, because still, of course, we do have access to schools and kindergartens which exist for our people on native language, but they are not enough. They are not enough, and I see that why I'm involved in media. Media, of course, is playing very big role in preserving your culture and language, first of all. And I feel that younger generations are losing access to their language. And that's why we are mostly making films on our native language, and we need more media, more films, especially for younger generations. And for example, my kids are all the time are sitting on YouTube and have access to all those media, but all of them are mostly in Russian or in English even, but not in native language. So this is kind of another, to my mind, point which we have to work over to get access of our kids to more materials on our native language. And yeah, that's kind of complicated thing. I'm not a scientist or a politician or sociologist to discuss about that, but yeah, filmmaking is kind of a process for us which is more like about self-identification, who we are, why we are here, what we're doing. And of course, we just want to express ourselves by the mean of cinema. And of course, we love cinema very much. That's why we are making lots of films per year. And now we have lots of viewers who are looking for new releases, and we have our own kind of fans who want to see that films. And that's why we are just keep on moving, because we feel that there is kind of demand and wish of local people to have their own media on their native language, and about ourselves.
Thank you, Sardana. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's not only the states that have done the colonialism, but it's also in the art, in films made by non-indigenous peoples. Those have created kind of a stereotype, and also some of us have internalized of these images that have been done. So that's why indigenous films are really important, because we also not only represent ourselves to the world, but also you are reintroducing us to us. And now I would like to I'd like to have you answer 2 questions on based of what you've heard about decolonial love. What does it mean to you, and how do you use it in the art you create? If Sara Margrethe, do you want to begin?
Thanks. The term was or is new for me. So, but I read now a little bit about that. But in some sense, I think my work goes straight into that term, especially Päivineida, Daughter of the Sun, because my aim was to make a film that is not having anger, that is not judging, but is telling the story of the experiences of this woman in a way that touches you and makes everyone think of it and maybe wanting to know more. And also, so that was really important for me, because I don't think anger solves anything. So, and I also was really conscious about that I would never, or I should be aware of not presenting the lead character as a victim. But she should be clever without being mean. She should be clever enough to handle the situation where she's being faced with the racism in that setting. So that was really important for me. And hopefully by that, making a film with those clear ideas, I hope I can reach further then it makes people open themselves for the issue. Because for me, it started with anger. I got the idea because I was facing racism among colleagues. And I spoke to friends who had also been experiencing the same things. And I just thought, I just need to make a film about this. But how to handle this issue? So I couldn't leave the topic, so I just needed to work on that and find a way of making the story, telling these issues that racism still exists in Norway today towards Sami because they are Samis. And it has been happening long time. And by telling this story, we acknowledge that these things has happened and it still happens, unfortunately. And hopefully this film can make people change their attitudes towards Sami or whatever culture. Like, yeah, so that was my aim. So I guess somehow I am within that term, even though I was not thinking of or even knowing about that term. So yeah.
Thank you.
What was the question? Yeah, I think it's like decolonize love. I think it's a very nice term. I have to say that you kind of move forward with love, and that you kind of learn to love yourself and your closest, but also to maybe be more generous also for your own local community. That we live in a small community, and that we are that we are I don't know, supportive of each other, I guess. Yeah, that is also some sort of love. I haven't really thought how it's connected to what I do, but I kind of feel that in Sápmi and maybe in indigenous world, there are so many stories or angles that have never been told, and so many things. I feel we are living in a gold mine, you know, everything that we ourselves carry, but also our elder generation carry. So I think that kind of every new film or every new artwork or every new perspective is something that we need, and something also I feel that Sami community very often like sucks into, because we need to have, like you said, our own perspectives, not YouTube and just the HBO series, but more linked to our reality.
Kiitos, Elli-Sofi. So I'll just repeat the question. So based on what you heard Elizabeth talk about decolonial love, what does it mean to you, and how do you use it in the artwork you create?
The way I use it is very subtle in my movie. You can see it mostly in the names. In the movie Among Us, the character names are all Greenlandic except for my character. His name is Mio. It's not Greenlandic. So yeah, it's very subtle. We also follow the main character, who is also learning his culture, learning about the shaman and the Northern Lights, or the mythology and culture. So it's also how I wanted to show it to the world. I've seen a lot of heavy movies about colonialism, and they never interest me. So so I want to work with a very subtle way to show our culture and the effects of colonialism. So that's my way of healing. Yeah. In the next movie, it's more clear. The spoiler alert: the villain is based on Greenland anchor towards the Danes. So yeah, I can talk about that more. Yeah. So yeah. All right.
Rianak, thank you.
Yes.
So, when I am working with the film, because I'm grown up watching that other people come into Sápmi and make films about us, and there is a lot of, like you said, it makes a lot of stereotypes, and so when I work with my films, it's a balance when you work with films, like especially when you have this indigenous background, like, okay, how will the audience receive this? Then you have the Sami audience, but you also have the non-Sami audience. And you want to be, what is it called? Truthful. You want to be truthful to your Sami audience as well as the non-Sami audience. So it's always like a challenge when you start working and when you're writing a script, and how will the Sami audience receive this film, and how will the non-Sami audience receive this. So that's another thing what I always try to work with. So like my first short movie, it was about a young Sami reindeer herder, and I was in that, when you're in making films, you're in the process, learning new things about you and your society, and I try to, like, my starting point is also like when I make films, like what does people talk about in the private around the coffee table, and what does people talk about out in the public, out in the Sami media, out in the majority media, and so why don't we like talk about this out in the media? So, and I, because I'm also from a Sami reindeer herder family, and I know there is a lot of challenges in the reindeer herding society with the politics. But yeah, so people always say to me, are you making a film about politics? No, it's not. Like, politics is a word for me, like you distance yourself from the film, from the story in the film. So I always say, no, not really, but it is, the background is politics, but I'm making a film about ourselves. This is our story. This is what we have to face. This is our daily life, especially with the reindeer herding grazing lands now, with the industrialization. Yeah, and how do you try to tell your story? Like, what kind of way will they receive this film? So back to my first short movie, I was really like more like very. I didn't put it out. It was more indirectly, a bit more like. Careful, and so with this film, which I directed with my sister Ella-Maria, which will be screened tomorrow, we wanted to be more open about the challenges we have in, and then it's really exciting to see, okay, how will the audience receive this? How will the Sami audience receive this, and how will the non-Sami audience receive this? So it's a process, and it's really interesting and fun to try to explore those kind of things, how you can express yourselves through film.
I actually wanted to comment one thing based on what I've heard, and once again I want to acknowledge how important these films are that you make, because what I think in Sápmi we still have a lot of that culture of silence, and but I also think that it's the lack of having a safe space to talk about taboos, that because we want to, well, we are a small community, but then there is also, if we talk about these difficult things, will the non-indigenous public create new stereotypes? And I've felt during like my work, I've felt some kind of loneliness because I have taken part in media about the Me Too conversations, and I felt like the Me Too conversation hasn't really landed in Sápmi quite yet. And I have been in a panel discussion in the same room. It was a discussion about sexual harassment towards Sami youth, and I was giving a keynote speech there, and at that point I kind of felt lonely talking about there, because I'm really grateful there were many people, but I felt like there weren't that many representatives of our community. And I think that's why it's really important that we have these films, and these are kind of our safe space at the moment. And in Sápmi we still kind of need to find the places where we can practice openness and talk about these wounds that we have.
So no, was that in, did you say that was in this room?
Yeah.
So you're having some memories right now.
Yes.
I wanted to sort of pose this next question, but I had taken little bits of notes as you were talking, and part of whether one embraces or it's used in where you're from, the experience of colonization, first of all, let alone, because you have to recognize colonization to decolonize, at least linguistically, right? But the success of a colonial structure is when you don't have to be actively involved in having a community perpetuate self-hate. So internal colonization is, they call it like lateral, like sideways violence, right? So it's not the traditional concept of, where we've moved from exterminate to physically to exterminate sense of self-identity, personhood, and then folks, and that's part of what the decolonial love, I believe, is also meant to help unpack, is when can we think about that when in ways where we're starting to hold back, silence, critique each other, when bringing up, for example, as Sona mentioned, like sexual violence or harassment is still a very difficult thing to talk about in any group setting, and suddenly you feel lonely because people are sort of thinking, I just wish she wasn't, sharing this, or we should talk about this in an even more private space or how it works. This question that I had prepared also, and maybe it doesn't hit you personally, but to heal, you have to have love. And to have love often, and to show love, you have to heal from something. And when, a lot of you described your work, and quite often your work is who you are in many ways, or it becomes that in a moment. Are there times that you have witnessed? So, have you seen it happen, or there was a moment where you felt something that you would describe as healing? And I'm always interested in this question just because it seems like one of those things you talk about, but you're like, well, what does that really look like? What does it mean? What does it feel? And when you were talking about the experience of how you made a film because you experienced it personally, and then, the process of it. And I just, maybe that could start it off was there a moment that you felt a healing or an experience in the process that was like, it brought you together with this art that you're making, and something that you would describe as healing?
The film consists of through happenings. People told me their experiences, and I mixed that into the film. Mm-hmm. So there's stories from 3 different women in different ages that I have put into the short film. And when they told me the stories, and I asked, can I use this in a film? I will, of course, not tell. It's your story, but it would help me to put focus on this issue. They said yes, I could do that, and by doing that, just first listening to their stories, making them talk to me, and then me going back and write the script and trying to get the essence of their feelings into the story, and of course at the same time having my own experience, and writing and doing the film. Of course, it makes me think much, and I talk to others, and we discuss the issue. So while already when writing, there's somehow a healing process going on, because I have to dig into the theme. I have to go in there, and then also when making the film, really interesting. When we were shooting the film, there were like maybe 6 or 7 actresses or actors, and what happens in the setting or while we are doing, really exciting, because then we are trying out the group dynamics, yeah, in a situation where somebody is teasing. What happens? So yeah, of course, it gives me a great chance to go into the theme, and then when the film is finished and I can screen it, and people tell me they've been laughing, they've been crying, they get so emotionally touched of it. That is healing. It's so nice. It's so good to make a film and get the feedback from audience, and also sitting there and feeling what happens in the venue when we are watching the film. It is kind of healing, and it feels good. I'm really glad that I took the chance to make that film. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have to go in order. If there's, anything that speaks to you about love, healing love. So now the pressure's on. I don't want to traumatize you, so.
Well, I can. Yeah, I think also I agree with Sara that the film is healing, kind of a film. And I was thinking about, for example, Kiihtu Kiihtu, and when I start that process, it's, I don't know that much. It's a one black lump, kind of. And also if you address something difficult, like I also in Sami Boja, so it's just one lump in the beginning, and then you start to deconstruct it and look more into one thing, and and then you realize more why is it like this, and you get more of an understanding. At least I have done in my films when kind of digging into it, because if it just stays there and that theme, but when you go in there you see more nuances and start to I don't know, get new perspectives and different angles and things that come forward in the film, and that is hopefully new things for the audience as well.
I'm Lisa. I'm asking, what is the biggest problem or the wound or whatever you are calling, which we have to heal ourselves? What is the sort of the biggest thing which is inside us? What do you think? Or you are not brave enough to tell it? Or it's very difficult to make a film about something which we have to heal. What is the problem? What is the wound? What is the...
I remember when I first was attending Imaginative Film Festival. It was in 2012, and when I was watching lots of films there, and before coming there, I didn't have any idea about kind of that there is kind of a direction of so-called indigenous filmmaking, indigenous stories, and so on. We were just thinking that we are making a film, and that's it. No any idea about it's indigenous or not indigenous, and. When I just started to be, I just dived to that world, and I faced lots of that wound and trauma watching, for example, those Canadian films, all those history about residential schools, about that lack of education, lack of housing, alcohol abuse, and so on. Yeah, such kind of problems exist not only in indigenous communities, to my mind, in modern world, but of course, yeah, that history was terrible, and it was a reality, and it is in some cases a reality still. But when I returned to Imaginative, I have been there several times, but this time in 2018, on October, I've been invited to work as a jury member, and I just compared that program and this program. So around how many years passed? 12, and then 6 years passed, and I see that stories and topics, most of the films are changing. They were more like positive in a way that they are more like healing films, in a way that they are now, especially younger generations, they are turning faces to their real traditional culture, and they are really very proud of that. They are self-confident about being indigenous and representing their language and culture in a very, strong and positive way. Especially, I remember that film, Tattoos of Mana. Maybe some of you watched, about indigenous people living in Oceania and how young people are returning their tattoos on their bodies. And it was so nice. Even when I was watching this film, I was so happy to see their faces, and even I felt very proud of them, because they were returning all those things which they have almost lost. And yeah, this is the power of cinema. And that there was exactly that element of healing for sure. And we were discussing with other jury members that now we are facing and we are watching films which are completely different. And this Fast Horse, which we also will be watching here, also from that, to my mind, story. Oh no, that, yeah, from that point of view. And for example, I can give our that victory which we made during Moscow Film Festival. It was kind of, yeah, also historic moment in a way that first time ever Sakha film was in the main program. You know that Moscow Film Festival, it's sort of one of the biggest in the world. It's a very old festival and it was really well known in the world, especially during Soviet times. And then when we got there at the main competition, and maybe some of you heard that film, The Lord Eagle, Toyonkul, got a Grand Prix, main award, yeah. And it was honestly, it was a shock for us. Yeah, because this is, first of all, it's a very low budget film. Second, it's an indigenous film totally. Production is totally indigenous. Our language, our history. This is our history because that story was based on a classical Yakutian literature. Not so much known writer wrote that short story, and the filmmaker just made based on that story. And I remember reaction of people who were watching that film, and I felt that this kind of it is not about exotic, or so they are indigenous and their story is very exotic. It's not about that. The language and the story was quite universal. All people, audience watching that film, that's felt that they have to be more attentive to each other and first of all to the nature, because that story is about yourself and your attitude to nature, how you treat your environment, so the environment will treat you. And the screening, by the way, will be here also soon at 4:30. Maybe you'll come and watch that film. Yeah, and I just want to say that this is the film which is really kind of having this sort of healing element to my mind. Yeah, and I think we have to follow that direction. We have to make such films, not all the time complaining about problems, but about changing because we are responsible ourselves to make our own modern story. We have to represent ourselves more like self-confident and brave and making our own heroes. And you see that people react them very, what's that in English? Adequately, yeah. Thank you.
Any other panel responses to either what Lisa posed or I did?
I think in Greenland, one of the biggest problems is hatred and anger towards Denmark and the Danes. There's a lot of they took our jobs, they took our culture, appropriated our culture, or so. I talked about the villain. That's why I brought the hatred and anger as a simple, make it a single character. So I have two characters. The main character, and he's the good guy. He can see the positive things about the colonial stuff. And the other one is angry about how the Danes took our culture away from us. Then he wants to get rid of the Danes. I forgot what I wanted to say.
There's a question.
Okay.
After you.
Okay.
I see you, yeah. So healing, not, I'm trying to think of ways to...
Healing.
If that was part of what you were thinking about, healing or love.
The way I make the movies, I'm making a trilogy. The first one is learning our culture, about our culture, and learn how to use. Or, and the next one is about the hatred and anger. And that's where people, or the many people from Greenland, they can see themselves maybe of the villain, and then they can, how do you say it? Work on healing and accepting the colonialism. Yeah, and the third one will be about acceptance, and then moving on. Yeah. Yes.
So the characters, how they're written and what they symbolize is part of this. You're being very explicit about the process. It's like,
Yeah.
I might push in this second the second part of the trilogy, this issue, but it comes in the third where there's the healing process or
Yeah.
a connection, so that you can put out there some of the violence, for example, and then have an indigenous response in healing it.
Yeah. The movie is also about alternative universes where you have two choices. The other one chooses the good path, and the other one the bad. And then we see how they evolve or grow differently. Yeah. Yep.
Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, because hello, my name is Jan, and about
Thank you. Yes? Yeah, you were waving, right? Okay.
Just because we are living in a remote island in Greenland, and in that way we maintain really like Inuit knowledge. I'm saying that because I'm in Masters of different way. I can understand him because us older generation, we've been through like washing machine world in the system shifts in many times in our schoolings. So many of our friends, they are not educated, and we never put question for ourselves because the development is still going on.
I wanted to also. I don't. I have never like felt. I have to be honest. I have never thought about the healing, or felt like I'm in a healing process. For me, it's more about the journey that I'm going through. Journey about discovering my own society and world, and it's more about the like when you make a film about something which has a challenge, and then you are done with the film, the challenge will still be there. But the exciting part of it is, are you making a room for to talk about it? Are you making a room to debate about it? Are people like opening up themselves? I think that's the interesting part with filmmaking, and also because it's a journey with never with no end. Yeah.
I think we are running out of time soon, so we should have the third and last question for the panelists, and if the audience still has some questions, that's also possible. But showing decolonial love, it's a courageous act, and I wanted to ask you, our panelists, if you ever faced difficulties in your work because of how the community responded to an idea that you wanted to talk about in your project, or if you had any. You can also talk about some like other issues, because making films and creating artwork, it can be intimidating. Yeah, if you, Sara Margrethe, would like to start.
As I told you, I was when I got the idea of Baby Neda, I started talking to other people, friends of mine, about harassment and racism. So and they told me stories. So in a way, I was just like taking the temper in the Sami society. And hearing that this is an issue that is worth telling. So in that sense, I did research, talking to people, and so in that sense there was not a problem. I knew it was important for me to tell this story, and it would be important for the Sami people and others to hear this story. So in that sense, it was not difficult. What was difficult, though, I haven't told about this, and I've been thinking, oh, should I tell this, or should I be silent about this, and then I think, no, maybe I just tell it. The most difficult part was actually not to get funding from the Norwegian funders, but to get funding from the Sami funders. So I was really fighting for getting funding to this movie, and I got feedback like this was not, it was unmodern, it was not, it didn't have any actuality, and it was not well developed, and that was the most difficult part, and I don't really understand because, the script was developed as good as I did. And it's made in a film now, and my director's statement was, yeah, it was, I've been working really hard. So I don't know whether it was the issue, that it was too hard for some advisors to read the issue, that they felt like, oh, I don't want to hear this story at all, or what it was. I don't know. I never got an answer. But somehow, after not giving up, never give up, even though you got to know, keep on fighting. I got some funding, and we made the film. And now the feedback I get tells me that it was really worth fighting for it, because yeah, it's traveling around the world, the film Päivineda, and also the Norwegian broadcasting has bought the short film, and they are screening it on television, so everyone in Norway can watch it. And that is really good, because I think especially those who are not interested in these topics should watch the movie. So yeah, that was the most difficult part for me, making this film.
Thank you, Sara Margrethe. Would you like to continue, Sophie?
Well, I don't know what to say. Well, for example, working with Kiihtu, which is about the Lestadian religious movements, I think there were in the process a little bit people who were anxious that is this right to do? Is it right to show this kind of trans situation? Because it is something that was very personal for those people who were doing it, or how you say. And also a little bit difficult because we wanted to shoot in a church, so we asked a lot of churches, but in the end we got to film in the church in Kodegeino. That was very healing. That was very how you say, surprising, I guess. We just show this film in Tromsø now, and now is the next screening here. So I will look forward to what kind of reactions it will give in the Sami community, because I really thought when I work with this film and another film that this time I want to do it. It's for the Sami people. In Sami Boya we were talking a lot about international, everything international. But now I was thinking, no, I want to do it for the Sami. Yeah.
Kiihtu, and how about Sardana?
Well, what kind of problems we are now facing about that? When we are, what was the question? I just lost the idea.
Well, if you could just explain how, what kind of difficulties you might have had in your community when wanting to bring your culture to the world by producing these films.
Yeah, the main problem, the main difficulty. So, well, I want to say that our filmmakers quite free in a way to choose the topic and the story. And even that was noticed by some film critics. And I remember there was an article by a well-known film critic. He wrote that the most important thing among Yakutian filmmakers is that they are totally free to choose the topic and totally free to make their films. Even that bigger industries, bigger countries where the filmmaking industry is like a real industry, they can be even jealous about that. This is quite I think, one of the most kind of important and defining things for our filmmaking. If, for example, there will be sort of control over us, above us, about strong funding and so on, then probably there won't be such freedom, and there won't be many filmmakers who are very brave and start doing their films themselves. As I said before, our films are really very low budget in comparison with even another part of Russia, but we are just continuing doing our films, never just counting money, how much money we have. If we are just willing to make a film, we're just doing it. But of course, if we want to be to make another step to get a more high quality and to be distributed in the world, we have to get more funding. And I just want to say that till nowadays we don't have that clear access to federal funding. So we call it federal because all those structures of funding situated in Moscow or in St. Petersburg, in the bigger cities. And we just making films mostly for our own money. Yeah, and this is one of the main difficulties for filmmakers because they wish to make bigger projects, but their lack of money and funding. Yeah. So, and also I just noticed that usually the filmmakers try to choose those stories which are sort of neutral, neutral, and I hope that there will be soon be stories devoted to ecology, for example, ecological disasters. But there is kind of not threat, but I don't want to say that they're afraid of that stories and so on. But soon probably they will occur more like more sharp story, sharp kind of actual stories in films. I hope so, because with the mean of cinema, as I said before, you can represent your idea and you can even solve some problems. That's it.
And would Mark or Mailis comment something just before we finish?
I think I talked about it a bit in the beginning about thinking about you have your own Sami audience and the non-Sami audience, and how you try to like balance it, like so yeah, I feel like I have been talking about it a bit in the beginning of this conversation.
Okay, thank you, Mailis. Would you, Elizabeth, like to add something?
Just that usually when a discussion ends, immediately everybody starts talking to each other about the things that they would have said or were thinking, and that's where this is where the juicy stuff is. So, this is hopefully just having you start to think about these issues, because the art is healing. It's incredibly important. But who you are matters, and your ability to do it and sustain it over time as the community. And so just taking a moment in all the things that you do, as you are doing for others mostly, that you practice that self-love. So, and I know everybody's got to go to another film, but Ian, did you want to say something really quick?
Colonial power. I've really taken some time to go and explore indigenous cultures and explore indigenous art, and not just the way Jan was saying, that the awakening that can happen through what you're bringing through these stories can also be very traumatic for people who are coming from the colonial side, who've grown up in all of the privilege of this colonialization that's happened. There's very little space for people like myself who are having these experiences to find space to heal, and it can be a great pleasure to come and bring that onto indigenous people. That's what it seems as though you're talking about here, and what you're trying to achieve is to not just create healing for yourselves and the indigenous culture, but to even reach out into the modern world, into the mainstream world, and express who you are and where you've been, and to give them a chance to see what you're doing. So I just really like to commend that, and just really want to bring that point friends and family, and to try to break through those barriers of inherited privilege and expectation of geopolitical dominance is really difficult, but being able to point to some of these pieces of artwork to show people who they are is a great way to help with that. So, yeah, I just would like to commend that and acknowledge the amount of pressure that you're under to do this work. So,
Like I said, at the end, everything gets juicy. Thank you for that. Really quick, yeah.
Hello, my name is Anne-Laila Ötzi. I'm director of the Sami Film Institute, and I just wanted to say regarding Sami films, we've seen a big development the last 10 years especially. So from only having historical films, the big features of Nilscope, we really see the new generation of Sami filmmakers who are telling the contemporary stories and being very, very brave and very talented. And this is why we see such a big development in the Sami film society. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's time to go, so thank you.
Thank you.